Hello, and we are the Crazy Eights in Business and Law 313V. Today we'll be talking about torts, but more importantly, assault and battery within the sport. My name is Brad Otero and I'll be talking about baseball.
My name is Mario Martina and I'll be talking about soccer.
My name is Christopher Trujillo and I'll be talking about boxing.
My name is James Leon and I'll be talking about basketball.
My name is Leah Munoz and I'll be talking about football.
As you all know, there's a difference between assault and battery. For instance, assault occurs when the defendant's acts intentionally causes the victim reasonable apprehension or fear of harmful or offensive contact. However, battery occurs when the defendant's acts intentionally causes harmful or offensive contact with the victim's person. Now, we will be discussing different types of physical sports and where players or competitors go past the boundary of legality and can be tried in the civil or criminal court for assault or battery.
My topic is basketball, specifically in the NBA. Basketball is a contact sport, and for my segment, I will be explaining a scenario of assault and battery that actually happened in the NBA. Here's a video of it.
Intelligent game tonight. Then Wallace is fouled, and Wallace did. Wallace right at our chest. This has potential to be serious if they don't get between.
This altercation right there started what is known as the malice at the palace. This next video clip that I will show you shows it in slow motion.
That way, you've got to let it go. That's not that hard of a foul. It's not a normal foul, but not that hard. And Ben Wallace can't react that way.
As you can see right there, Ron Artest fouls Ben Wallace pretty hard. Ben Wallace retaliated and shoved Artest. This altercation happens every now and then in the NBA, but it doesn't lead to what happens next.
Artest has jumped over the scorer's table and is trying to get down to the bench. Artest is in the stands. Oh, this is awful. Fans are getting involved. Steven Jackson's in the fans.
Right there, you can see Artest was hit by a cup thrown by John Green. John Green is a fan, and so Ron Artest rushed the stands to attack him, and sure enough, all the Pacers players followed him to either get him out or help him fight fans. Everything broke loose from there. Players were in the stands throwing punches left and right, and the coaches were trying to get them out of the stands and into the locker room. Eventually, after fans were throwing stuff and players were fighting people, the coaches had got them and team officials got them back to the locker room. But on the way back, the fans were throwing everything from popcorn to beer to hot dogs, whatever they could find, onto the Pacers. A lot of legal trouble came from this. According to an article on Grantland.com, 5 fans and 5 players faced legal troubles. The 5 players were Ron Artest, Steven Jackson, David Harrison, Anthony Johnson, and Jermaine O'Neal. According to an article in USA Today, this explained all the suspensions. Artest was suspended for the rest of the season. Jackson was suspended for 30 games. O'Neal was suspended for 25 games, which an arbitrator then later reduced to 15 games. Johnson was suspended for only 5 games, and then David Harrison was not suspended at all. All the players were faced with misdemeanor assault and battery, which results in 30 days of jail time and a $500 fine. Later, prosecutors chose community service over jail time. The 5 fans, John Green, Will Paulson, John Ackerman, Brian Jackson, and David Wallace, all faced probation, fines, and also community service. But only John Green faced jail time. He was in jail for 30 days. This is a fine example of fighting in the NBA that crossed the line, which turned into assault and battery.
Today we'll be talking about torts in respect in soccer. In specific, the case of Luis Suarez, a 27-year-old Uruguayan soccer player that bites Giorgio Chiellini, Italian's defender, during an official soccer match between Italy against Uruguay on the 2014 World Cup taking place in Brazil. Suarez had already had 2 previous suspensions in his career for biting opponents during matches. During this scenario, during the match, these 2 players, Giorgio Chiellini and Luis Suarez, were side to side in the idea of waiting for the ball. When the appearance of this case is when Suarez strikes Chiellini and bites him in the shoulder. The ref, despite of Chiellini showing him the marks of Suarez's teeth in his shoulder did not punish Luis Suarez or take him out of the game. In the visual side, this video will show more of what happened in the scenario.
Luis Suarez has struck again. For the third time in his career, he has bit an opponent in the middle of a game. Luis Suarez got really close to Italian player Giorgio Chiellini, and he went for it. He went for that bite. The Italian player immediately tried to show the ref, but he seemed to be unfazed because he didn't even get penalized for it, which angered the Italians. Back in 2013, Suarez earned a 10-match ban for biting a Chelsea player, and in 2010, he got a 7-match ban for biting another player. Italy only needed to draw to advance, but that didn't happen, especially after Claudio Marchioso's red card forcing Italy to play a man down in the last half hour of the game. Even though he didn't get penalized during the match, Suarez faces a ban from FIFA, which will investigate the incident.
First of all, Luis Suarez violates soccer expectations, for he clearly violates the FIFA regulations. In the negligence part, he acted unreasonably, intending to injure the opposite player. He had a duty to abide by FIFA regulations and did not act reasonably. He did cause injury on the opposite player, and there was proof of the injury by Giorgio Chiellini showing the teeth marks on his shoulder. In the duty part, Luis Suarez obviously had a duty to abide by the rules set by FIFA regulations. In the breach of duty, he fails to follow these FIFA regulations and injures the opposite player by biting him. And the causation is obvious, where if he had not acted unreasonably, the injury would not have been taken. In the assumption of risk, no assumption in this injury, for in soccer you do not expect to get bitten by other players. In the intentional tort part, and specifically battery, Suarez intentionally touches, in this part bites the player, which harms him and creates his injury. In the assault part, there's no assault, for Luis Suarez never warned him he will be injured. In the outcome of this case, the FIFA committee, which is responsible for sanctioning serious infractions which escape officials, in this case referees' attentions during match, stated that Luis Suarez was banned from any soccer match and in the exception of friendly matches and training with his team for 4 months.
Boxing, one of the most physical sports in the sports industry. Today I will be talking about when the legality of the sport are violated and therefore considered battery. I'll first go over the history and describe a case on why the sport was deemed illegal at one point. Then I'll explain how and why the ruling was overturned and formed in the modern day sport that is widely watched and enjoyed nationwide. Secondly, I will discuss some of the Queensberry rules and describe what intentional fouls are. And I will give examples of what these fouls, where a boxer commits an assault or a battery. Finally, I'll show a visual example of how a boxer commits a battery towards his opponent and provide some in-depth commentary. A little history on why the sport was deemed illegal at one point is shown in an early case on the issue of prize fighting for fame in a violent manner in the R versus Coney case, where consent was not a defense for battery committed against the participants. And the participants were found guilty of both assault and battery. The court at the time ruled that combatants in a duel can't give consent to assault and batter each other in a prize fight because it is a breach of peace. An individual can't consent to destroy the right of Crown to protect the public and keep the peace. However, the introduction of the Marquise and Queensberry rules sought to improve safety in boxing, and therefore under the new rules, boxing was demonstrated as skill and sparring, and accordingly was legal, which is how the sport of boxing entered the common law world in the modern 20th century. Now that I discussed the history of how the rules were developed, I will discuss where the boxing participants oversteps the boundaries of legality towards battery. According to the World Boxing Federation rules, prohibit boxers from committing intentional fouls and certain actions the referee does to terminate the contest or disqualify the participant. Some actions a ref can do is if an intentional foul causes an individual injury, the bout can be terminated or the boxer can be disqualified. The way certain intentional fouls are considered battery is when the action persists after the bout is stopped, or if the participant causes severe bodily harm to the other competitor. Examples of intentional fouls are prohibited from hitting below the waist, tripping, pushing, biting, or spitting. Use of elbows or kicking are also deemed illegal and results in a foul. Now that I discussed what intentional fouls are, I will show an example clip of where a boxer, Mike Tyson, commits a battery against Evander Holyfield. As you can see, the fight seems to be going smoothly, and then Mike Tyson leans in and right there commits a battery. And as you can see, he continues to push Evander Holyfield. Now you can see in his left ear, there is no evidence of harm. Right there, it seems clear. But on his right ear, you could see blood, which is evidence of severe bodily harm and basis of the injury. Now, after the fight, Tyson was fined $3 million, and he had to serve a period of community service as a result of the battery. Now, this is just one of the examples of the many battery cases that happen in boxing.
Now I'll be talking about assault and torts in baseball. Baseball is a very serious game. Teams fight their way to the top to make it to the World Series. But ultimately, the umpires are the ones who control the game. And all the arguing in the world from players and coaches won't make them change their mind. And when players and coaches don't get their way, sometimes they can get abusive. A very good example would be Delman Young in 2006. During a minor league game, Young was up to bat. The pitcher throws the ball and was a bit outside, but the umpire believed it was a strike and called Mr. Young out. Mr. Young was not happy. He exchanged a few words, and here's a video to show what happened.
Runner goes at second, pitches in there for a called strike 3. Delman thought it was high. Darnell McDonald went into third without a throw. B.J. Upton, the trail runner, held it first. And Delman Young is still staring at the plate, wondering where that pitch was. And he says a word or two, and now he's been tossed from the game. Well, Delman just threw his bat, and the bat hit the umpire. Oh boy, that's a bad move by Delman Young.
So if you saw, Delman exchanged a few words with the umpire and walked away. As soon as that happened, the umpire threw Mr. Young out. Mr. Young didn't like that, so he threw the bat straight at the umpire. Now, as soon as Mr. Young threw the bat, assault was in play. But then once it hit the umpire, battery was put in. Though the umpire wasn't seriously injured, the umpire could have sued Mr. Young for battery. The only thing that happened to Mr. Young was a 50-game suspension. Here's another small scenario. John throws a baseball at Pat. He intentionally throws it at his head. It hits Pat in the head and causes him some injury. If John did it intentionally, he would be found guilty in battery. Now here's a legitimate case that happened in 2013. Jose Offerman of the Long Island Ducks was up to bat. When the pitcher threw the ball, it nearly hit Offerman in the head. Offerman suddenly charged the mound with the bat in his hand. Once he got to the pitcher's mound, he thought he was looking for a fight, and boy, he did get one. A bench-clearing brawl came into play. During the fight, one of the players on the opposing teams was struck in the head by Offerman's bat. As soon as the brawl cleared down, Offerman was ejected from the game, and later that night, he was arrested for assault and battery. The opposing team filed a suit against him, thinking that it was not right. The Ducks argue that they cannot be viciously liable for Offerman's conduct because his conduct was outside the scope and course of his employment within the Ducks. So within the scenario, to elaborate, to evaluate the degree to which the employee was acting within the scope of his employment, courts look to whether the employee's conduct was 1. Occurs primarily with the employer's authorized time and space and limits, 2. Is of the type that employee is employed to perform, and 3. Is motivated at least in part by purpose to serve an employer. None of that was into play, so Offerman had to be all on his own. In the end, Offerman, the defendant, motions is granted on the issue of permanent damages, so he did have to pay the opposing team's player for damages. In the end, it seems that baseball teams only focus on the game. But when the players try to take things into their own hands, such as assaults and batteries, they are not associated with the clubs or the owners of the team.
When it comes to the National Football League, we oftentimes do not hear about assault or battery cases occurring on the field. Instead, the NFL will put a price tag on these altercations or even suspension. This is due to the fact that when a player of the National Football League is on the field, they are consenting to physical contact. When it comes to football, standards of tort liability cannot apply to professional football since it is a business which is violent by its very nature. Which brings us to what truly does happen when an active battery occurs, which the NFL calls it unsportsmanlike conduct. The definition that the NFL provides in Rule 12 of the player conduct under Section 3 is that there shall be no unsportsmanlike conduct, which includes throwing a punch, a forearm, or kicking an opponent even though no contact is made. When a player violates these terms, the commissioner must be notified and must decide the corrective measures that need to happen. For instance, when you look at the altercation between Titans cornerback Cortland Finnegan and Texas receiver Andre Johnson.
Randy Moss has 3 catches for just 23 yards.
Andre Johnson and Cortland Finnegan getting into it. Handoff for Ward on 3rd and 8. And Ward leaning forward. Flags come down. Oh, there's punching now.
Yeah, Finnegan and Andre Johnson going after it. Both of the helmets were ripped off. And we may have even more action.
Oh, it's continuing. It spills over.
In this situation, you see that both players yanked off each other's helmets, punches were thrown, and each individual's team joined in this fight, which is an active battery, or as they like to call it, unsportsmanlike conduct. Instead of this being brought to trial, the referee and side judge signaled ejection immediately, and in the end, each player was fined $25,000 each. In conclusion, if this situation was brought to court, the outcome would be in favor of the defendant due to the fact that the standards of tort liability cannot apply to professional football.